Hello from Japan. President Trump is coming here in about 16 or 15 days, right? So about the 27th of October. Today is the 11th of October, but you'll see this whenever it hits your inbox. We're on a slightly different time zone. So interesting. Japan. Why am I in Japan? Well, I just left Thailand, actually. Why was I in Thailand? Because Thailand is the hyphen in Indo-Pacific security, as one friend calls it. And that's why I spent so much time there. In fact, Masako Ganaha and I just had tea recently with probably the former prime minister, or definitely the former prime minister of Thailand. In fact, I wrote the last 2 pages of his book when he was prime minister before. It's called The Simple Truth is the name of the book. And I actually titled that book The Simple Truth. And I wrote the final 2 pages of the prime minister's book, The Simple Truth. So we were just back in Thailand. He's not the prime minister now, Abhisit, but he may be again soon. So anyway, why am I in places like Thailand and Japan and whatnot? Well, I study war, right? And I'm actually in my library right now. Actually, weirdly, if you look at my library, which is quite a work, it's taken many years to assemble this architecture of knowledge. And if you actually look around, even though it's about war, I think most people you won't find very many books on actual war. You won't find many books in my library that look like, hey, somebody who assembled this library, which I think somebody who's really keen and very tuned into a lot of things might look at the library for a while and go, this was assembled with a lot of a forethought. I've built an architecture of knowledge that helps me to predict what's going to happen in the future. It's taken a long time to figure these things out, and it's an ongoing process. It's a work in process. And in any case, you won't find many books on, airstrikes and tank battles and all that stuff, right? Even despite that I spent so much time in actual ground combat, I spend most of my philosophical and research time on a different level of war, right? And because war has so many facets. For instance, music. Music. Most people might not imagine how important music is as a weapon of war. Or intoxicants. I'm going to get to Trump real quick and Japan Prime Minister. This is very important. Or intoxicants. This is a fascinating book that just came in. I've read parts of it online, but it's called The Idol. Anyway, I'll save that for another time. It's about opium and other addictions, and the book is from 1923, I think. It's called The Idol. You might want to read that. It's very expensive. I had to look around to find it. I've read parts online, and anyway, it's one of those books because I'm always looking at things in the rearview mirror that help me predict things that are in front of us. That's why I spent so many years studying physics as a kid. I mean, I was basically addicted to physics because I thought that's where I could find ground truth. That's where I could figure out what's going on in the universe. And I'm not sure I got any closer, but I have been able to predict the actions of man much better than what I see the average, let's say, expert do, like far better. Because keep in mind, over time, I get to see what I predict and never goes to, and I never say publicly, but I get to watch it. And over the years, I've gotten better and better. That's why I've written like these 3 books on Chinese information war. They're in Japanese language only, right? There's one. These are all like 10 years old or more. There's book 2 or 3, whatever it is. And there's the other one. These are all my books in Japanese that Americans have never read unless they speak Japanese, right? And they used an old photo from Iraq, which they found online, I guess, the publisher. But in any case, these books have turned out to be amazingly accurate. Look, Trump is coming here soon. Why is he coming? It's war. It's straight up war. And if you could read those books in Japanese, you would understand some components of this, some deep components. Like, for instance, the tariffs that Trump is threatening China with now, another 100% and yada, yada, yada. Skipping that right for now. But what I'm looking at here is the larger picture. The larger picture. Why is Trump coming to Japan? And why is this potential new prime minister of Japan, Takaichi? She was friends with former Prime Minister Abe, who was assassinated. And by the way, not widely known, I've sat in Abe's seat at his desk, right, when he was alive. Actually, he wasn't there. I was just in his office with some of his assistants, and we were meeting at the next room, and they took us in there, and I was like, oh, can I sit down? And so I took a picture with Al Johnson and me and a few others that we were doing some research on the things that are now happening. That was like 10 years ago, right? So that was like 10 years ago when Abe was still prime minister. And then, of course, he was later assassinated. So as you've seen since 2020, I've been predicting famines. I strongly think we're going to end up seeing famines. It's a matter of time. Conditions continue to be set. And a lot of this, recon by reading is very important. I got a whole library here, more on drugs. Masako's book on we were just in Thailand, and there's dope stores everywhere. We literally about 3 or 4 days ago now, we walked into one of the dope stores just shortly before we got on the flight to come over, and walked in and actually got a prescription for dope. You can actually walk in, in Thailand to buy dope, and you can actually get a prescription at the counter. Actually, I bought some of the dope and I flushed it down the toilet so that we could get the prescription, and I paid for that before I even got the prescription. They actually imagine you have to have, a prescription for apples to buy them at the grocery store. And they're like, okay, check out, get your apples. Now you need a prescription. That's what happened. You can't make up this stuff. Masako is Japanese, so she's not allowed to even purchase, possess, or anything. So she didn't touch any of it. I just bought it. They rolled it up the joints right there, and we flushed them down the toilet. We'll show you a video later. But the point is that that's all a part of this greater war. And that's her book on, they're trying to push dope on Japan now. But let's get down to the new Prime Minister, Takaichi here. Friends with Abe. She's all over the news about, hey, this is great. She's tough on migration. Speaking of which, let's get to that. I just sent a message to Tom Homan, DHS secretary and whatnot, and quite a few others of that caliber, saying, listen, what's the date today? 11 October, 2025, IOM, United Nations, highest, Catholic Charities. None of these NGOs have been defunded. They're all still perfectly intact and operational, like down in Panama, where I spent so much time warning about this before it was a thing, right? These invasions are far from over. I've warned about this, warned about it, and warned about it. And I've said it publicly, I've said it in videos, I've said it in writing many, many times. If you don't defund these architectures, the plumbing of this, then you are part of it, and this is just a big kayfabe. And this is what it is. It's a kayfabe. It's clear that the invasions will continue. Right now they're continuing with visas and that sort of thing to the United States. But they're also pushing them around in Japan. Like, we walk and we see all kinds of people here from all over the world that have no real business in Japan, that they're part of the invasion. The IOM is doing it here, right? IOM, straight up. And anyway, so Trump is coming over. He's going to meet Takaichi on the 27th of October. Why is he doing that? Now, one thing that they need to do, we're major partners in Japan, and I've said this many times, is by far America's most important partner, by far, in the world. Nobody even comes close. But very few people understand why. And they'll say, no, that's not true. It's Israel or something. Israel is humping our leg and stabbing us right in the back. They're professional victims. They are predators. Israel is a construction of the British Empire in order to control the Suez Canal. I've talked about that many, many times. And they're nothing but a danger to the United States. We don't actually need them. You can see the polarity over in that section of the world seems to be possibly, I'm unclear at this point, might be shifting over to Qatar. So Qatar could be. I've been to Qatar a few times, and it's an interesting place. The United States has close relations with Qatar, and they're not insane, actually, like Israel. Because this is about routes and resources, not about Israel. Israel is about routes and resources, right? That's why Israel was even formed, period. It was not formed as the Holy Land. That was just the reason given to the worker bees to come help clear the land, right? And here, you can have a piece of free land, come over here, fight these people, and then, of course, the people that are basically be a useful idiot, right? Of course, they don't sell it like that, but that's what it was. I've got a whole bunch of books right here on, speaking of which, let's talk about that. Israel. Zionist collaborators with the Nazis. 51 documents, right? Many Zionists were actual Nazis, and so were many Jews. That's inconvenient. It's the truth. Fritz Haber, the guy who designed the Haber-Bosch process. This is him, or he did the Haber part. He's a German Jewish chemist, right? So I've talked about him many times, always in the light of he's the one that invented the Haber, or discovered and trailblazed the scientific part of the Haber-Bosch process, in which you can take the hydrogen off of the natural gas and combine it with nitrogen that we breathe and make nitrogenous fertilizers. And that's why they do it at BASF plant, biggest chemical plant in the world, at Ludwigshafen, Germany. Misako and I went there twice before Nord Stream was interrupted, saying, hey, this is a very important place, BASF. The reason it's called, by the way, Haber-Bosch process is Haber was the inventor of the process, and then Bosch, also a German chemist, is the one who made it industrial, right? And so in 1914, they opened the Ludwigshafen plant of BASF, and it became the biggest chemical company in the world over time. And so Misako and I went there twice in advance of Nord Stream getting destroyed, because we thought Nord Stream was going to get destroyed. And I'm not saying that in the rearview mirror. We were saying that way in advance and way publicly. The last time we were at the BASF plant in Ludwigshafen, Germany, was 14 days before Nord Stream got hit. 14 days before, we were publicly saying, yet again, we think if something is going to happen to Nord Stream, and that's why we are at BASF plant. Talk about, we took a dart and threw it 5 miles and hit a bullseye. That was not an accident, right? And likewise with the screwworms. Again, took a dart, threw it 5 miles and hit a bullseye years in advance that we're going to have a screwworm problem, or that Darien Gap would become a major invasion route, right? Again, dart, 5 miles, accurate. My books on the Japanese situation now. 10 miles. 10 miles. 10 miles. Bullseyes, bullseyes, bullseyes. If you read Japanese, find these books. Tell me if anything was wrong, right? Tell me what was right and what was wrong. You're going to be astounded. Please buy them. I guess they're available on Japanese Amazon. I don't know. Because as you can see, I never even push my own books. I'm a terrible businessman in that regard. I'm going to change all that. Because in fact, with the knowledge that I've been throwing out there, if I had monetized this, I wouldn't have to take any donations. Let's put it that way. So it's time to change that. And people with big bucks, you need to contact me if you want to have investment ideas. We have a few. So Fritz Haber. So this guy, Fritz Haber, German Jewish guy, developed the Haber-Bosch process. Guess what else he developed? You're not going to believe this stuff. You know all those people that go to Auschwitz and claim to be victims of everything? Well, guess what? This guy, a Zionist, also made the Zyklon B gas that reportedly killed 6 million Jews, which, of course, that narrative has collapsed. It's not 6 million. That's utter bullshit. That's completely collapsed. That guy, the German Jewish chemist, Haber, Fritz Haber, he's the one that made the Zyklon B. That's not convenient to mention that, but this is an interesting book, Between Genius and Genocide. Zionist. You know Zionist? Those guys. That's right. The guys who just genocided Gaza, right? And now they're doing a ceasefire? No, that's not what's happening. They're doing a combat halt because they're reassessing and doing whatever they're doing because the war is far from over. That much is clear. So, in any case, I'm in Japan, and so they're going to meet. Now, President Trump, he needs to go to Yasukuni Shrine. he needs to go to Yasukuni. Masako and I have been there. I've been to Yasukuni many times. We've been together numerous times. I've read every letter in that museum. If you go upstairs by the train, the train that they brought in from the Burma Railway, it's over there. It's in Tokyo. If you're in Tokyo, you need to go to Yasukuni and pay respects. They actually pay respects to Americans there. Yasukuni Shrine, Yasukuni Jinja is the Arlington of Japan, right? It's the Arlington. Now, I've said that before, and some Americans throw a tantrum and say, no, it's not the Arlington. You don't know anything about Yasukuni and yada, yada. I've lived in Japan 700 years, and I know everything about all this. Okay. Right, all right. How many people are buried in Yasukuni? How many people are buried in Arlington? I don't know how many people are buried in Arlington. But often when I ask them, the experts on Yasukuni, they'll say all these things, and I ask them how many people are buried in Yasukuni, and they'll say, I don't know, but it's a lot. And I'll say, yeah, you don't know. Because it's zero, right? There's nobody buried in Yasukuni. It's a memorial, right? It's a place to pay honors, right? So, I mean, the bottom line is it's very important to the Emperor of Japan. This is very touchy when I mention this, so I'm being very delicate. The Emperor of Japan will not go to Yasukuni. Prime Minister Abe did, and others have. This prime minister, the new prime minister, will. It's very important. It's very important to go to Yasukuni. If a president refused to go to Yasukuni or refused to go to Arlington, how seriously would the veterans take them? In the Shinto way, which is the sort of Japanese religion, if you want to call it that, spiritualism. When people die, they're all equal. It doesn't matter if you were an emperor or if you were a street sweeper. Everybody is equal after death, right? And everybody should be honored after death, right? No matter what, whether you're a criminal, whether you're a saint, whatever you did in life. Now you've passed away, your body has passed away, and you should be honored as an equal and a neutral. All are equal, right? And so, bottom line, skipping past all that, if you're in Tokyo, go to Yasukuni. Masako and I have been there. We've talked with the head priest of Yasukuni. Super interesting man, highly intelligent. And if President Trump goes there, he will meet the head priest of Yasukuni. He will find, hopefully he'll spend some time talking with him because he's an extraordinary man. But President Trump should go to Yasukuni. Now, I say that at the same time, I think what's going on here is Japan. When you look at what President Ulysses S. Grant was saying in 1879, actually it was after he was president two terms, former general, he was doing his world tour around. He ended up in Japan. Actually, when you read President Grant's letters, I've got the 32-volume set of them. Actually, it's quite voluminous, 32 volumes, and all of them are quite large. But you look in volume 29, he ended up over in Siam, which is Thailand, where we just left 48 hours ago. And then the only two countries he seemed to really like on his whole global tour were Siam, now Thailand, and Japan. He liked Japan so much, he extended his trip here. And he was, in his volume 29, President Grant, former President Grant, was, communicating back and forth with the Emperor of Japan saying, whatever you do, there's going to be outside actors. This is 1879, keep in mind. President Grant said very clearly in nice soldier words, right? Super clear, short sentences, right? President Grant was warning the Emperor of Japan that outside influences would come and they would try to make China and Japan fight over Luchu Islands, which is now called Ryukyu, and or Okinawa. For those who were stationed on Okinawa, all the Marines and Air Force and whatnot that were there, Navy people, you know how much Americans love Okinawa. And but that the old name is, Chinese name is Luchu, right? And then you may have heard Ryukyu as well. And so President Grant warned that outside influencers would instigate there's a natural friction there at Luchu anyway because of certain routes and resources to get to the bottom line. And so President Grant warned that the outside influencers, I think he was talking about United Kingdom, Great Britain, but he was talking about somebody, and he was trying to. I knew he didn't want whatever that was to reach the world, but he was saying that outside influencers will instigate a fight between Japan and China, and then they're going to loan Japan and China money, and then they're going to own Japan and China, because that's what we do everywhere. That's what the United States does. That's what Great Britain does. That's what a lot of Jewish influence does. That's what a lot of people do, right? This is an old game. It's not just the Jews, right? It's the Catholics too. It's the United States. It's the Jews definitely do it. There is no question about that. They play hardball, and so does China. China does debt traps all the time. They've got Lao caught in a debt trap right now. You can hear the screams in the forest from all the debt traps China has caught people in. And we do it too. United States has done it quite a lot. We used to be better at it than we are now, because now we caught all of our young people in debt traps. We caught ourselves in debt traps. We used the same traps that we used over there. And how many people watching this have a lot of student loans? It will be a lot. And it's not your fault that you got tricked and trapped into that, because by the time everybody who's watching this, no matter how old you were, by the time you were born, by the time your great-grandparents were born, these techniques and tactics were perfected. The psychological lures and inducements and traps, it was perfected. By the time we were born on the savannah, like came out of our mother, surrounded by hyenas and lions, right? So, I mean, it's like that quick. You see those animals born on the savannah, and there's the lion over there licking his chops, and the buzzard flying around, and the hyenas, yapping around, and that sort of thing. That's the way we were born. We were born into information operations that were very intense and artistically formed, and a huge architecture. All the media, nobody watching this remembers when media was honest. You just don't. You might remember when you thought it was honest, but nobody remembers when it was honest, because it wasn't honest by the time we were born. I've got my little Walter Cronkite book over there. He was nothing but a globalist shill. He was a straight up globalist shill. He even said something like he'd be proud to sit by the right hand of Satan, or something like that. You can see it. It's on video. I mean, you can find it on YouTube. So in any case, what's going on? It's very obvious. China has been building up war with Japan for a long time. I've said many times before that all wars that I've seen radiate information far in advance, like far. And I don't mean like a week. I'm talking, years and years, generations. How was I able to write those 3 books? And now Trump's coming, and Trump's not coming here to talk about, something simple. He's talking about war with China, right? And this is a big war. It's all related to what's going on in Panama. I was on Alex Jones recently, and Alex said something about, I don't know, what did he say? You could find the episode. Something like, President Trump's taking back Panama. I'm like, no, he's not. No, he's not. I corrected Alex Jones on that. And, and it's just a lie. I mean, we're just not. China is clearly taking Panama. It's like amazingly obvious, right? I just spent a year there, right? I didn't just spend a week there. I just spent a year in Panama, right? Down the Darien Gap, going through the Panama Canal all the time, getting helicopters all the time, flying around, checking things out. Yeah, talking with members of the government all the time, talking with everybody under the sun, studying these books. You wouldn't believe my library in Panama. I've got a library in Panama that's impressive, that I made about Latin America and Panama and all that, right? I mean, this is only you should see my library here. It's just too big to put in the shot. I mean, it's taken a long time to assemble this architecture of knowledge that allows me to do these predictions so well. And so what's Trump doing? I mean, this is a global war, right? You see what's going on over in Armenia. Masako and I were over there as well. It's the route, the little Trump route there. They call it TRIP now. I don't know if you've heard of the TRIP route. It's a Trump route that goes through Armenia, and it's all about routes and resources by the Caspian. But one of these books, this one, that one there, that's from the 1700s. Under my Erdapfel globe, that's from the 1700s. That's all about Caspian Sea routes and resources. This is the British talk. You should see there in this book here. They're like hanging pirates and stuff. No, I'm sorry. That's Nagasaki. Anyway, I got another one around here somewhere. It's unbelievable. I spent a lot of time in it. But but they're talking about the routes and resources through Caspian and Caspian Sea area, and it's the same things that are going on now. We're just this. We're the same bears fighting over the same creeks and over the same caves. It's the same stuff. There are some things that have changed. Like now we have pipelines. We didn't have pipelines back then, so that opens another way of doing routes. We've got data cables, of course. We've got electrical cables, of course. The satellite orbital space is obviously very important, like geostationary orbital space and all that stuff, right? There's all kinds of different dimensions that we didn't have back then, like the pipelines and that sort of thing. But the general routes and resources, actually most of it's the same. And then there's some additions with things like pipelines and Suez Canal from 1879 or 69, 1869 Suez Canal, and then 1914 with the Panama Canal and that sort of thing. And they're still building canals, right? Anyway, not to go into that. But the bottom line is it's about routes and resources. And Trump is coming over here. When I go to Texas, I was in Texas a few months ago again. I communicate with people in Texas constantly. That's my American base is Texas. And why? I'm not there for safety. I'm there because Texas is a front line, straight up. And by the way, Pete Chambers, my good friend, is running for governor in Texas. So he's going all over the place, talking everywhere, talking at church, talking to the group, talking to anybody who'll listen. I've been across a lot of the border with Doc Chambers. We flown over Colony Ridge, that big colonia north of Houston together, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. We get a helicopter over there from our friend Dave Cannon. He always flies me every time I show up. I'm like, hey, I got some congressmen. Can you take me up in your helicopter? He'll take us up and fly around. Thank you, Dave Cannon. Huge help. And I've come over there with Daily Wire, and who else? Epoch Times. Epoch Times has come with me in many places. Epoch Times has come with me in Hong Kong, and Darien Gap in Texas, and Texas again, and someplace else. Anyway, I've been all over the place with those guys. Epoch's great, but in any case, the Doc Chambers is running for governor, and he knows what the problem set is, right? And a problem is that the same guy who's the governor of Texas now, again, someone I warned about many, many times in advance, and he's turned out to be exactly as I warned, and he was a Trojan horse, but it was right in everybody's faces. And Takaichi, who's future prime minister here in Japan, very soon, and unless in the last anyway, I've been busy in Thailand, but it should be this week. And in any case, she's clearly a Trojan horse. Now it's not popular with people. And some of my private chats, or some of these people in these private chats, are people whose names you 100% know. And some like normal, like with Melee down in Argentina, we went down there and looked at that as well. It was clear that I was not excited. Notice I never wrote anything. I was like running not neutral. I was running silent on Melee. I'm just watching this thing unfold, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, I'm not so confident in this. Misako and I went down there. And I'm like, no. This is not a good thing. And likewise here in Japan, and likewise over in Thailand. So many of the things that are going on. There's so many places that are under attack. But Trump is coming to Japan. I'm in Japan. And he is this is about war with China. It's not just Japan versus China. It's about much bigger stuff. Japan is also being invaded. Again, there are people from all over the world now. I mean, Africa and Asia and places that have no skill sets that are of any use in Thailand. I'm sorry, or there too, but in Japan. And so in any case, now. One of the things that's happening is, by the way, Trump, I don't know if you noticed it, but he just did this announcement that just got his new, he got a flu jab and his COVID booster. Did you see that release? So this is 11th of October. I think that was the 10th of October that release came out yesterday. So he's still pushing the jab. And meanwhile, thousands of people, it appears, are dying in America every week. Why? I don't know. when I was, anyway, at the end of the day, Misako, she knows all the right people here in Japan, all the people that are in the middle of the medical movement, like Dr. Yasufumi Murakami. They've estimated more than 600,000 Japanese have died from the jabs, right? Trump's still pushing it. And the lady who's going to be the new prime minister, Takaichi, she is a jab pusher, and she's all for lockdowns, a clear Trojan horse. You can skip past all the happy talk about all the other stuff and go straight to that, and that's what you need to know right there. Bing, right? So whatever else is being said, that's a kill shot. That's an actual kill shot for your country. We don't know what those jabs are going to do to all the children that are jabbed. Many children obviously are already dead. But for instance, in Thailand, they took all the children. School is mandatory in Thailand. You don't have an opt-out. You can't stay home and homeschool, actually, in Thailand. They took all the kids in the schools and they jabbed them. They rented like auditoriums and whatnot. All the school kids in Thailand were jabbed. What does this portend for the future? I do not know. But it's similar here in Japan. Huge numbers were jabbed. What does that mean for the population in the future? I do not know. The only way we're going to know is to wait and see. Obviously, it's a big deal. Many American children, European children as well. And we clearly are in the middle of a population reduction. And, yeah. I'll save the rest of this for later. But at the end of the day, I wanted to say a few things. Venezuela obviously is a big deal. That's part of the larger thing that's going on. You hear the so-called war on drugs, which is obviously anybody paying even marginal sense or marginal attention to this since at least even a year would realize it's not about drug stuff, right? If we were going after drug trade, that doesn't even make sense. Whatever. So their casus belli is, they're just making it up out of thin air. But you can see that the Venezuela war, there's a high chance it'll go seriously kinetic. I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does. But one thing that we can see is that it is getting serious. Now, if you have any questions, let me know. One more thing. Antwerp and Rotterdam. You see the strikes over there in Antwerp and Rotterdam. Those are the two biggest ports in Europe. Again, that's why Masako and I spend so much time over in Netherlands. That's where Rotterdam is. The biggest harbor in Europe is Rotterdam. They've been on strike, right? I don't know what this portends either, but all part of the larger context. So many of these little things here and there, which normally it might be a little, significant, but, if there's nothing else serious going on, then, okay, whatever. It's, we're pretty resilient. We have a lot of routes and a lot of resources, but those routes and resources are being crushed down pretty hard. By the way, before Haber brought, actually, this is quite interesting. I happen to have these on the table at the same time. Before Fritz Haber and Mr. Bosch made the Haber-Bosch process, you know what the big thing was? Guano. Guano. I don't know if you know about the guano rush, but this is quite interesting. The Great Guano Rush, which is what I call mainstream media now. The Great Guano Rush. Entrepreneurs and American overseas expansion. Guano. Bird droppings. There's whole islands of it, right? And this is amazingly important fertilizer. And, fertilizer is, a huge part of a country's resilience is obviously their food security. Japan has no food security, right? And, it just doesn't. And this is what concerns me greatly about Japan. And it doesn't have energy security. It needs to crank up all nuclear reactors and crank them up hard. And, but when it comes to, speaking of which, the bears are killing people in Japan now because so many farmers are gone. There's just bears running around like Wild Kingdom up in northern Japan. You should see some of these bears. They're massive, and they're highly aggressive. There's two types, and they're both serious bears, right? And they're both killing people. Anyway, but the Great Guano Rush, there was the Guano Act where if you discovered a guano island or a guano source, the U.S. military would come defend your company right? So if you were out there with an exploration team or a ship or something and you found that, you stake your claim, the Navy would defend it for you. I mean, that's how important guano was. And we were cutting off Germany from guano. That's why Germany came up and they're like, hey, we got to find another way to make fertilizer. And Fritz Haber is like, because, we were leveraging fertilizer. And they're like, how about we take some of that hydrogen off of that natural gas that is burning off somewhere and mix it with this nitrogen and make ammonia, make nitrogenous fertilizers, right? Which is a big deal. And so, and then that was 1914 they started that. And so all this stuff is related. This architecture of knowledge is like, this might look like just like a wild book on bird crap, but it's not. That's total war. That doesn't look like war though, does it? And that doesn't look like war though, does it? Well, it does. I mean, he invented Zyklon B too, and other chemicals that were used in chemical warfare. And but another thing is by the way, related to that, another thing obviously is currency. Look at the obviously the U.S. dollar has seen better days, and maybe seeing its last days. This is the history of American currency, by the way. Well, I hope that goes in focus, right? How do you like my new lens? I got a new lens to make it better. I'm using a 50 millimeter lens, by the way. It's a Sony lens. It's one of those 1.4s. It's the best 50 millimeter they make for the photographers are always asking me photography stuff. And this is an interesting book, The Chinese in Mexico, 1882 to 1940. I'm always studying these Anthro-Insula, the human islands, because they're always weaponized, whether they be Jews or Chinese or so many. The Anthro-Insula are weaponized. I call them human islands because some cultures will form a human island. And so they're weaponized both directions. Like, let's say you wanted to install a new government in Iraq. So you would find the Iraqis that live in America or Europe or whatever, and you enable them, and here's your new president in waiting. You know what I mean? We do that all the time. We've done that a lot. So you can weaponize, say, the Polish during the Soviet days, the Polish who were living in Chicago and other places like France. We weaponized them using the CIA. Actually, I was in 10th Special Forces Group. My two A teams were training to actually parachute into Poland, which we never did. I went to Polish and German language schools for that sort of stuff. But the Anthro-Insulas, the human islands, are useful for that sort of warfare, like offensive, that direction. Actually, the CIA operation was called QR Helpful. And so QR Helpful is actually an interesting name of a book. You might want to read it to understand more about that, how we weaponized that Anthro-Insula. We did the same with Thais, that were living overseas in World War II. When the Japanese were here in Japan, now we just left Thailand. We took a lot of Thais that were overseas and we trained them. The OSS did, basically former before the CIA was formed. We trained them in places like Great Britain, and we inserted them back into Thailand. So that's one way to weaponize those human islands, those Anthro-Insula. Another way is the inverse, right? Like China does that a lot. A lot of the Jewish architectures do that as well. And the people that are in place, they'll work hard to get in the government, that sort of thing. So the Chinese that are in Mexico, this is 1882 to 1940, right? And so it's part of their firmware to you look at the Chinese in Thailand, they tend to rise to the top. Malaysia, same. Indonesia, same. They tend to, because of their basic cultural firmware and their habits, they're able to over time take over places just by being there. It just takes time, right? And so what I'm getting to is these Anthro-Insula are quite intense, and the Chinese model for this. That's why I have this book and so many more of these. I'm using those gold backs as bookmarkers. But down in Panama, there's significant Chinese Anthro-Insula, and I think it's about 6 or 7 layers deep now, maybe even 8. In other words, there was the first layer from roughly 1850, and then there was other layers during different construction periods and whatnot. And now there's this one now that's really flooding in hard, and the Chinese Communist Party works to develop networks in these old Anthro Insula, right? And so that they can, people that are already there, that speak the local languages, that know everybody, that are intermarried. So they're already, consanguinated, literally, with the local populations, like in Mexico. In fact, I've got some old silver coins from Mexico. You know how the Mexicans, you can buy those things for like $50 or $100, right? You can get an old coin and with the chop marks that the Chinese traders would use, but they're Mexican ones, right? And because anyway, at the end of the day, is what I'm saying is these Anthro Insula will be used in a weaponized version in places like Honduras and obviously Panama and all over the world. And it's fair play. I mean, that's how things go. You know what I mean? And the Chinese are quite good at it. And so, yeah. Anyway, thank you everybody for your support. I need cash support. I need financial support because Masako and I are going to start. We are going to make dual studios, one for her and one for me, so that we can take people in studio for interviews because it's time to do that. It's time to do those things. And because we know a lot of people and we have a lot of experiences that others just don't have. And it's time to start getting these things out by getting experts sitting in front of us that will spark our conversations. But by the way, silver and gold prices obviously are through the roof. Silver, its history and romance. I found this book in a Tokyo bookstore. All these things that are happening now. I don't know if you've noticed it, but silver and gold prices are going through the roof. I don't have any affiliate links or agreements at all. If you notice that, I just don't, and that way I've got credibility actually. That's why I take the donations from individuals. But the vast majority, except for one, are very small. And so I need help big time. And Masako and I, because we're going to have a new studio. And we are going to talk about these things, like, for instance, the silver and the gold. They're going through the roof in part because obviously the U.S. dollar is going out the window. And it's just a matter of time. We don't know what's going to happen, digital money, all these different things. But thank you for supporting my work. I hugely appreciate it. And I'll be looking at comments on this one. I'll actually read all the comments in the first week. And that doesn't mean I'm going to read them on the first day. We got people flying in from the United States, and that's going to be very time absorbing. But I'll read all the comments on this particular post, at least up for, let's say, by the next 10 days, I will have read them all. And so please, if you have a comment, leave them. And I'm looking forward to trying to field questions. Y'all have a great day.